Professor David's Reliquarium, not to be confused with his vivarium. Maybe next time we build a planetarium. But for now we have Professor David and his Reliquarium.
Greetings and salutations. It is I, Professor David. Welcome back to my Reliquarium. Today, we will be enjoying the winner of last week's poll, RJ Ivankovic's At the Mountains of Madness for Beginning Readers. It is a reimagining of HP Lovecraft's original in the style of Dr. Seuss, but do not let that fool you. It is quite the harrowing tale indeed. But before we tackle that, I have an announcement to make. We have partnered with Bloodbound Books, and they have agreed to provide us with many spooky, spectacular tales to enjoy. In addition, we have been able to hire our first assistant to aid me in my experiments.
Master!
Damn it, Igor! Get back in your kettle! Where was I? Ah, yes, the expansion. So, going forward, we will be experimenting and testing out many new techniques, meeting new friends and adversaries, and diving into many, many spooky and harrowing, nasty little tales. So join us, and let us see just how amazing these experiments can become.
And now, a word from today's sponsor, Harley Marley's Gnarly Barley.
Oi, I'm Holly Molly, and this here's me barley. Holly Molly's Gnarly Barley, 70% alcohol by volume. It's a party with your pancakes. And now for something completely different. The Larch. Welcome back. Now, let us take a journey into a frozen wasteland. HP Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness for Beginning Readers by RJ Ivankovic. Dedicated to Howard and Theodore, as always, for the spark, and Allison and Maximilian for keeping the flame alight. I am forced into speech, and I warn you take heed, as the threat I'm describing is dire indeed. The Antarctic's a place that you don't want to go, having been there myself. Please believe me, I know. I'm aware how exciting the science must seem. For myself, it was just like fulfilling a dream. We'd discover great things I'd no reason to doubt when the ships Miskatonic and Arkham set out. As our doomed expedition set course and made sail, I could not have imagined how badly we'd fail. I had to take samples from under the ice with Frank Pabodi's wondrous device. And the rocks I collected were so very old, they'd been buried before the Antarctic was cold. After digging up samples for over a week, our biologist Lake had come down for a peek. When he picked up a rock, the professor cried out, "These are footprints, I tell you. Of that I've no doubt." This presented a puzzle that couldn't be solved. They'd been made before creatures with feet had evolved. I discussed it with Lake, and he wanted to try to uncover more proof in deposits nearby. So believing the rocks there would suit him the best, he took half of our party and headed northwest. But the hunt for more fossils did not go as planned. Bolton's engine malfunctioned and forced him to land. They decided to camp near a vast mountain range that had risen before them, majestic and strange. With the landscape aglow in a golden red light, they had surveyed the mountains and guessed at their height. The group also observed that the ice there was thin. After drilling and blasting, the ground had caved in. Lake reported by radio what he had found while exploring a cave in the long frozen ground. There were dozens of samples all over the floor, and on one side sat fossils of 8 feet or more. He'd recovered 14 of the strange elder things with their barrel-shaped bodies and membranous wings. They had starfish-shaped heads and triangular feet, and they'd slowly thawed out when exposed to the heat. An attempted dissection did not go so well, and the dogs had gone crazy on smelling their smell. Having drawn up some plans for my own westward flight, we all said our farewells and turned in for the night. Though he'd promised to radio after daybreak, as you know, there was no further contact from Lake. When his silence convinced me that something was wrong, we were fueled for a rescue before very long. As we took to the skies with incredible haste, I took note of the mountains dividing the waste. In the peaks of that range, like a trick of light, many hundreds of structures had come into sight. I was certain the vision was something I'd dreamed. It just couldn't be real. At least that's how it seemed. When at last we arrived in the spare aeroplane, we were met by a scene that was truly insane. We saw things that we know we can never reveal, and the truth we agreed we would need to conceal. So inventing a simple, conventional tale, we reported the camp was destroyed by a gale. The horrific events that occurred overnight we have kept from the public to spare them the fright. So I urge you, abandon that long frozen land and the Starkweather Moor expedition you've planned. Now with total repugnance, I'm forced to recall and explain what we found at Lake's camp to you all. Just exactly what happened was anyone's guess. Some equipment was missing. The camps was a mess. All the men and their dogs had been torn into shreds, both dissected and salted, right there in their beds. When we'd counted the dead, there was one absentee, quite suspiciously missing. It was Mr. Gedney. As we searched high and low and all over the place, we discovered 6 graves had been dug at the base, and inside of each grave a dead elder thing lay, but we'd little idea how they'd gotten that way. We began to think maybe that Gedney went mad, that the sight of the elder things made him go bad. But as true men of science, we couldn't ignore the great mountains beyond and our chance to explore. A reconnaissance plane that went up for a look had reported strange shapes in each cranny and nook. On the following flight, Mr. Danforth and I had flown over the peaks when we took to the sky. It was then we discovered a long-lost plateau and a city half buried in deep ice and snow. The great city was ancient, impossibly vast, and abandoned sometime in the long-distant past. The colossal remains of the petrified place bore the symbols and shapes of a long-absent race. For example, where clearly some water once flowed, unexplainable towering columns still showed. We decided, of course, we need to go down and take out copious notes on that Antarctic town. Once we'd landed, we saw it was not very far to a 5-pointed building that looked like a star. Over millions of years it had filled up with snow, which prevented us accessing chambers below. Quite a lot of the city was frozen like this, when the crystal clear ice had filled up the abyss. So we walked through the city in search of a door that might let us inside to more deeply explore. But as Danforth and I took our tour of the past, I believed he was losing his sanity fast. As we searched the cold streets of Cyclopean stone, I suspected his nerves were more strained than my own. He insisted he saw a faint trail on the ground, and could hear in the distance a musical sound. When we came to a wall where a hole opened wide, this allowed us to access the secrets inside. We were nervous, of course, but we gritted our teeth and descended down into the city beneath. At the top of the structure, the rooms were still bright. As we made our way downwards, we lost all the light. We dropped pieces of paper to help find our way while exploring that maze on that terrible day. We found windows and rooms sealed with petrified wood and began taking notes on whatever we could. We took photos which used up the film that we had, and I'm glad, as without them, you'd think I was mad. All the walls had been carved with amazing reliefs, and the details won't fit with your current beliefs. There were star charts and myths, and most probably more, on those murals that stretched between ceiling and floor. But they also confirmed what we'd come to expect, that the thing we feared most was exactly correct. Astounding. Greetings and salutations. It is I, Professor David. I have a spectacular discovery to share with you. Here at Professor David's Reliquarium, we have discovered something in our laboratory. A proprietary chemical capable of repelling the supernatural. But don't trust me. Look at these results. It's mind-boggling. Listen to these happy customers. He'll tell you they work like a charm. Ghosts, monsters, spooks, all a thing of the past. We have stocked it in these easy spray cans. It comes in monster and ghost, closet and under the bed. Sold wherever they stock useless crap. Welcome back. Now that is out of the way, let us dive back into this cosmic conundrum. In the depths of that tower, the light of my lamp revealed carvings of creatures like those at Lake's camp. It was they who'd created the artworks we saw, the strange artworks not seen by a human before. They'd recorded a story told long before man, though I don't know it all, I'll recount what I can. There were eons of history upon each wall, and the things they revealed will amaze and appall. At the moment, I just want to give you the gist. When it's published, you'll pick up the details I've missed. Many hundreds of millions of years have gone by since the old ones crossed space and came out of the sky. When the creatures arrived here, they went straight to work, building cities way down in the deep ocean's murk. But they didn't use tractors and they didn't have cranes. See, they utilized creatures with hypnotized brains. These were blobs protoplasmic with many green eyes, and their amorphous bodies of prodigious size. You will find them called shoggoths if daring to look for a mention of them in Alhazared's old book. They made creatures for labor and some just to eat, which included a simian prized for its meat. And those monkeys evolved from back then till today, just because they'd behaved and stayed out of the way. Once their cities were full and they had to expand, they moved out of the oceans and onto dry land. Just as life settled down for the Elder Thing race, the star spawn of Cthulhu had squirmed out of space. Then a war had begun for control of the earth, and the two races fought it for all they were worth. But they fought to a stalemate and had to declare that the planet was something they just have to share. While I'm sure there were details I happened to miss, the agreement they came to went something like this. If the old ones returned to their most ancient homes and then settled down under their undersea domes, then their Antarctic cities could stay where they were. Of course, wanting to keep them, they had to concur. And the Starspawn, of course, had been guaranteed land for the incomprehensible things they had planned. At the time, a great continent rose from the sea in the place where one day the Pacific would be. And the pre-human spawn of Cthulhu agreed that this new land would suit them quite nicely indeed. The Cthulhuoids, of course, aren't around anymore, and their stone city Relay sits on the seafloor. Their new continent sank with the passage of time and was lost in the dark and the deep ocean slime. So once more life returned to a casual pace for the slowly diminishing Elder Thing race. Then a problem arose that they didn't expect when the Shoggoths stopped showing them any respect. It occurred once the Shoggoths had labored so long they developed ideas about rights and what's wrong. Over millions of years they had learned to rebel and had started to think for themselves then as well. The next struggle began when the Migo arrived, an event that the Elder Things barely survived. An uncomfortable truth that the conflict revealed was a change in their bodies that couldn't be healed. See, the comfort that having a home planet brings had stagnated their spacefaring membranous wings. They discovered their empire came at a cost, as their freedom to travel the cosmos was lost. An attempted expansion was brought to a halt by the constant attacks of the Migo assault. Then the old ones were driven from lands in the north, and the Migo prevented them venturing forth. As the years slowly passed, the Antarctic grew cold, and unable to take to the spaceways of old, they sought out an abyss where the water was nice, while their city was above was consumed by the ice. While we paused for a moment to ponder their fate, as this wasn't recorded and caused some debate, we detected the faint smell of spilled gasoline, which revealed the direction that someone had been. Having sniffed out the vapor, we came to a room and discovered a campsite set up in the gloom. What we saw on the floor with our very own eyes was a pile of our own expedition's supplies, an abandoned inkwell, a few empty tin cans, and some scraps of torn paper with alien plans. We could recognize structures and pathways we'd been, and the symbols resembled the carvings we'd seen. It was clear that whoever spilled gas on the ground had been stopped by some rubble and then turned around. When we traced where they went, we arrived in a space, a huge, empty and open cylindrical space. A great spiraling ramp wound its way up the wall, and small exits were spaced out around the great hall. At the base of the ramp was a left-behind sled, and beneath a tarpaulin, poor Gedney lay dead. As a sledge dog had also been neatly preserved, we presumed they'd been stored to be studied, observed. We were taken aback by the horror we'd found, but were coaxed to go on upon hearing a sound. I'll be brief in describing the noise that we heard, which was clearly the squawking of some sort of bird. But the penguins we found were exceedingly strange, all albino and blind, in the 6-foot-tall range. We deduced they'd been scared up from somewhere below, and this helped us decide which direction to go. In the tunnel we chose, which was clear of debris, all the walls we observed were carved decadently. There were sections of tunnel incredibly steep, and two mingling odors increased in the deep. We arrived in a star-spangled carved hemisphere, where the path to the waiting abyss was quite clear. While malodorous vapors assaulted my nose, with each step that we stumbled the temperature rose. It had gotten so hot, We unbuttoned our gear, and the old ones, it seemed, had the same idea. We descended through caverns and tunnels and caves in the honeycombed space of the Elder Things' graves. Then the decadent artworks we'd recently passed were replaced by strange carvings of primitive caste. They were clearly inspired by earlier art, but an alien something now set them apart. We had started to notice the faraway sound of a chorus of penguins still deep underground. As a thickening vapor appeared in the air, the still worsening odor became hard to bear. When the mist slowly thinned to dramatic effect, we were met by a horror we did not expect. A small pile of dead Elder Things lay on the floor. We believed there'd be 8, but we saw only 4. At the sight of those old ones, I felt really sad. They had come to an end undeniably bad. After millions of years frozen under the snow, they woke them in a time that they just didn't know. They'd returned to the mountains they thought of as home, to find igneous rock ruins and dark honeycomb. They'd become merely strangers, lost in a strange time, then were decapitated and covered in slime. See, the Elder Things just did what I would have done. So although I'm a human and not an old one, I could give them my sympathy right there and then. For they weren't only old ones, they were also men. It was then Danforth let out a nerve-tortured cry, and beyond the pale mist, a voice wailed in reply. "Tekeli-Lee!" When the voice started calling out, "Tekeli-Lee, you will not be surprised," we decided to flee. We begun our retreat. Not a word was exchanged. It approached us so quickly the air pressure changed. We were conscious, of course, of the missing old ones, and when thinking of like that, my, how quickly one runs. With the increasing exhaustion, we couldn't resist looking over our shoulders back into the mist. We were taken aback by the shape that appeared, as it wasn't the Elder Things that we both feared. It is still very difficult just to explain what came out of the dark like a passenger train. The analogy came to us both on that day. It approached like a train in the Boston subway. It had glowed from within, phosphorescently green, the bizarrest of congeries I'd ever seen, with the impermanent mouths and ephemeral eyes. A great Shoggoth was chasing us, to our surprise. In delirious panic, we fled from the shape, putting penguins between us to hide our escape. As it slithered toward us, the poor birds were crushed. They were squawking behind us while onward we rushed. Having backtracked as far as the spiraling ramp, we then climbed it by light of electrical lamp. Our one thought was escape on that terrible day, so we're forced to leave Gedney right there where he lay. Looking back on it now, it all seems like a dream, and I know just how crazy the whole thing must seem. We emerged from below in the pale midnight sun, and from there to the plain it was just a short run. When we took to the skies, I gave Danforth a break, and I took the controls for his sanity's sake. But the poor man had suffered a terrible fright when the distant horizon came into his sight. Mr. Danforth looked back at the mountains behind and saw something your next expedition will find. The strange atmosphere there had behaved like a lens and reflected a vision his mind cannot cleanse. I can't tell you exactly just what it might be. He just says he saw something that I didn't see. There are times, though, when talking about the South Pole, he becomes irresponsible and loses control. He will carelessly whisper of disjointed things, irrespective of any derision it brings. He's described a strange cylinder without a name, of the elder pharaohs a description once came. Then a black pit, white jelly, the color from space. And the old carven rim. And the old Shoggoth race. He once spoke of the moon ladder, eyes in the dark, 5-dimensional solids, all windowless, stark. He has mentioned a Yog-Sothoth, something with wings, and eternal, original, undying things. When he's fully himself, he'll deny it, of course. He will argue a book he'd once read was the source. For the old Necronomicon, he'd read it all in the college's library just down the hall. For the old Necronomicon, he'd read it all in the college's library just down the hall. He had studied that book in his earlier years, and he claims it gave names to his Antarctic fears. He'll explain how the strain and the things that he'd read had inspired the vision still haunting his head. To be clear, though, today he'll discuss the bizarre, and will hint at that something he glimpsed from afar. At the time, Danforth spoke with an insanity, simply shrieking repeatedly. The end. My stars, was that not a fabulous tale? RJ Ivankovic has 2 more stories in this series, Dagon and The Call of Cthulhu. Links will be placed in the description down below if you'd like to purchase them. In addition, if you'd like to hear them on our show, place it in the comments below. While you're down there, please click like and subscribe. It's a small thing for you, but an outrageous contribution to the Reliquarium. If you'd like to support us further, we are available on Patreon at Professor David's Reliquarium. All other social media links are below. Thank you so much for any and all support. Your contribution is most appreciated. And remember, if you're going to create something astounding.